Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amendury, and I'm joined today with a returning guest, someone I have a lot of respect for, just a humble guy out there reporting the news and, giving his opinion as he sees it. His name's Philip Kennedy of Kennedy Financial. He's got a book, financialjudobook.com. And he's just somebody who's, if you want to get the news of what's going on unfiltered, and also interviews similar to ones that you might see here, done by a guy that has got a lot of interest in the markets, and just maybe his own spin on things. I mean, you'll get to know him here in this interview. Really great guy. Definitely visit his YouTube channel, Kennedy Financial. Philip Kennedy, thanks for coming on Crush the Street to talk about gold, silver, Bitcoin, other crypto. Maybe we could talk about Trump as it relates to the markets. How you doing today, sir?
Not bad, Kenneth. Good to see you again. I'm excited to talk about all those things. You know I love them.
Yeah, well, hey, gold's doing well. I mean, we're seeing gold in the $1,500 range. That has me excited. It's been hard to know if gold is in a bull market, if you will. It's only in hindsight now that we've seen it, hit 1,600. And kind of can look back at 2015 where it bottomed out and go, hey, we're in this uptrend. But, throughout 2016, watch it have that dead cat bounce up to like the $1,300 range and then fall back down. It's been kind of hard on precious metals investors. And I know that. I mean, I've obviously been invested in it, and I've also talked to a lot of people who have been invested in it. People are just frustrated. I really think that the confidence is starting to enter the space. But yeah, let's check gold here for a little while. Gold hit close to $1,600, or it hit 1,600 this last week as we had the risk, what was seemingly the world on the verge of World War III, markets tanking in the futures and gold spiking. And then, we realized Iran just shot some bombs into some empty sand spots in the Middle East. And, it was a big non-event. I mean, but gold is moving higher, though. We are seeing that.
Yeah, the war buyers came in. But, Kenneth, gold has actually been moving higher for quite some time. To your audience, just so they know, I'm a financial counselor. I'm not a financial advisor. So anything I say is relating toward the emotions of money. I think we ignore the emotional side of money all too often. One of my favorite charts to really show the emotional side of money is the Dow Gold ratio. This chart, one might look at it and say, oh, well, this is a technical chart or a statistical chart. To me, this is an emotional chart. This just shows the emotions of human beings over the last, say, 110 years. And it looks to me that the market peaked out in gold terms in the summer of 2018. And I'm sure your audience has heard the expression on your show before, trees don't grow to the sky. Just because you have a president who's excited about the stock market doesn't necessarily mean that you can just make it go higher and higher well, you can make it go higher and higher in nominal terms, but you can't make it go higher and higher in real terms. So Trump and the administration was successful at doing that for quite some time. If we look at the chart here and zoom in the last 10 years, Dow Gold ratio, 16 ounces in November 2016. He pushes it all the way up to over 21, almost 22. But now we're seeing a pullback, right? We're not back to where we were before in terms of gold, but I think we are heading there. And in fact, I think eventually we're on borrowed time at this point. I think eventually we are going back below the 1-to-1 ratio that we saw in the late 70s, certainly back to, say, that 2-ounce ratio that we saw in the early part of the Depression. So I think
That would
that's
be
good for folks who believe in contrarian investing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's definitely what we're talking about today. Philip Kennedy of Kennedy Financial, everyone. One of the things I know Jeffrey Gunlock was talking about is the stock market having a massive pullback, crash, if you will, and not recovering, for the foreseeable future. Like, our generation, if you will, like it would take, decades for it to recover back to where we are. And that would be such a such a contrarian viewpoint considering what we've seen for the last 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, for the last century, right? I mean, we've just seen the stock market go up for years and years and years, especially over the last, 30 years. I mean, it's just been this parabolic hockey stick, injecting money, and the market's responding to easy money, liquidity, deficits, debt, low interest rates. And when the markets see this, it responds by just going parabolic. So what are your thoughts on a crash in the market? Because we've seen the change in the Dow to gold ratio largely just because gold is moving up, not really because the Dow has come down. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this all relates to the field of behavioral finance. This is a topic that I've looked at for quite some time. I focused on it with my MBA. And people tend to do things in herds. That's kind of how we survived as long as we have. But if you look at finance, it's no different. It's behavioral finance is just a study of psychology on a typical investor's behavior. And as you and I saw through the 2008 financial crisis, investors aren't rational. They tend to sell bottoms and buy tops. And that's because every person is prone to fear and greed. Very few of us have limits on self-control, and we're influenced by our own personal biases. Well, how have we developed those biases? It's very simple. We've all been funneled into these qualified stock plans. These are kind of creations of the federal government. They wouldn't exist outside of tax law. And the only reason they do exist is because I think the government is perfectly happy taxing your money later in life rather than doing it today. They'd rather tax your gains. So, we've got the president tweeting about 409ks, right? Obviously, he doesn't have a 401k. And the conventional wisdom is, look, we're all in this together. So why would you invest any other way? What are you going to do, right? We're all investing this way. But to me, nothing has really changed since 2008 versus now. Sure, the market has gone up in both real and nominal terms, but the underlying fundamentals of the U.S. economy are still very sick. So I think that in the years ahead, we'll actually see the market pull back in real terms, sound money, gold, as I pointed out with that chart earlier.
So let's chat a little bit about Bitcoin here. We've seen Bitcoin, year after year, especially when you look at the lows. If you look at what we're seeing year after year on the lows, it's just up every single year. Now, if you look at the highs, it's been a little more volatile when you look at the chart of Bitcoin. But we're in this now a decade, right? I mean, same thing with the bull market and stocks. I mean, it's still a pretty new infant technology, but it's garnering, the attention of some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And I tend to like it a lot. Trace Mayer, he's someone I know you speak with. I mean, he introduced me to Bitcoin. And I mean, he's been right time after time after time. And Bitcoin has shown its resilience through the years and building momentum off of what we're seeing through this growing network effect. But what are your thoughts on Bitcoin as it pertains to sound money, as it pertains to what we're seeing in the stock market, as it pertains to what we're seeing in gold? Because as you know, there's a lot of gold bugs out there that question Bitcoin and think it's worthless garbage.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a huge Bitcoin bull. I don't think Bitcoin is going away. And that's because I'm a contrarian investor. I mean, there will come a day when Bitcoin is yet again in a major bull market, and everyone will be telling you, oh, you know what, it's going to 100,000 or it's going to 1,000,000. And that'll be the point at which I go the other way. And I'll say, hey, maybe it's time to buy some gold. Or maybe at that point, who knows, maybe the Dow gold ratio will be 1-to-1. And it would be time to buy the market again and sit in the market for 20 or 30 years. But I espouse the beliefs of contrarian investing. I'm a contrarian by nature. What does contrarian investing mean? Well, take a look at this crowd. I mean, look at the CNBC crowd. They're relaxed. They're happy. Everyone is fully invested. Nothing can go wrong. The U.S. stock market is the place to be. But the problem is everyone who wants to buy this market has already done so. So if you look at something like a potential war with Iran, that could lead to a serious pullback for starters and potentially instigate a bear market. So the US stock market is already vulnerable to any kind of bad news. And there's really no mom and pops left to buy once this market starts pulling back. While we're under these conditions in the US market, we've got something taking place very soon, which I think you and your audience is probably already very excited about. And that's the Bitcoin halving. In 120 days, Bitcoin will have from 12 and a half coins down to 6.25 every 10 minutes. At that point, only 900 coins will be mined per day, which means that the Bitcoin inflation rate per year will be 1.8%. Kenneth, that's lower than the Fed's 2% stated goal. And you're talking about what potentially might be the hardest, soundest money in the world. I just don't see any reason why someone shouldn't have a little bit, even if you hate it. I mean, even if you're the biggest silver bug of them all, even if you're a boomer, I think it pays. Just hold a little bit. You don't even have to hold a whole coin. Just own a tenth of a coin so you can say later, hey, you know what? They were right. This thing really did appreciate. This is a better form of sound money. And I know a lot of people have a problem with the fact that it's not tangible. It doesn't need to be. Our dollars are essentially intangible. They're all just digits in a computer. So this is a free market form of sound money. And if you want, you can use it to go to AppMex or many other places and buy physical gold and silver. I think it's a win-win.
Sure. Well, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the silver to Bitcoin's gold. And actually, I forgot to ask you about silver here.
Sure.
But let's talk about Litecoin a little bit. I mean, I remember one of our first conversations, talking about Litecoin, and it was a different environment at the time. I mean, there wasn't the conventional wisdom within the crypto space of all of the different competing tokens out there, cryptocurrencies, crypto assets. But Litecoin was the silver to Bitcoin's gold. And it was one of the honest ones out there. I still believe that, it has a lot of the characteristics that Bitcoin has, which is why I like it. But, having seen what we've seen over the last number of years, the question is there a need for Litecoin as there was maybe a few years ago, considering there's a lot more competition out there? And there's Bitcoin. We have Bitcoin. What is the purpose for Litecoin in this environment?
Well, like I told you in the pre-interview, I'm not a firearms nut, but I do appreciate the concept of self-defense. And there's three kinds of firearms that everyone should have. They should have a rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun. They should have one of each. And they all serve different purposes. And I think the same is true for Litecoin. And I take a lot of flack on my show because, as you alluded to, I have had Trace Mayer on. I had he and Da Vinci on the other day for a roundtable. So that was pretty epic. And they got pretty technical at one point or another. But because I have those kinds of guests, I get a lot of criticism and negative comments on both Twitter and in the YouTube comments section. And that's because there are a lot of maximalists out there who believe that we will have hyper Bitcoinization one day. It is the soundest cryptocurrency in the world. There is no need for any other. And although they could potentially be right, I'm not certain about that. All I know is that the free market will decide, and different human beings around the world will pick and choose the cryptocurrency that they think is right for them in daily commerce or wealth preservation, you name it. So in late 2017, we saw the consequences of high transaction fees and low transaction speeds with Bitcoin, which proved to me that there is a necessary reason for some of these altcoins. Who the winners will be, none of us really know. The fact that coins like Dash and Zcash have been pounded like 97, 98%, is definitely concerning. I mean, I was looking at the Dash chart the other day, and I forgot that in December 20th, 2017, Dash got up to like $1,500, and now it's trading at 65 or something like that. And believe me, I still hold some Dash, and I've held it ever since then. So, in paper terms, I've gotten crushed, but it also went way up too. So I did fine during the bull market. But I think there's a place for Litecoin. I think it really is the silver to Bitcoin's gold. I think if you look at just the Litecoin community, the Litecoin fam on Twitter, they're doing great things trying to spread cryptocurrency adoption, everything from the Lite wallet that you can download on iOS and Android devices to putting these seed cards in public places like grocery stores to spread the message of Litecoin. There's the Spedden app that John Kim is associated with. So, on the one hand, Bitcoin is the biggest cryptocurrency, and I don't see that ever changing, to be honest with you. There's just too many network effects, like the 7 network effects that Trace Mayer talks about. But there will be altcoins that swim along with it. And time will tell. I think Litecoin is here to stay, though. I mean, it's proven itself since 2011. It was one of the earliest coins to kind of skate in under the radar. So I personally hold a lot of Litecoin. And one final thing, it'll continue to be volatile, but I look at the emotional side of money, and I do so here in my personal life. Here's some facts and figures. You've all heard of the Mayer multiple. Well, here's the Kennedy multiple. It's 0.74. That is higher, or it was higher, about 85% of the time during the 2017 to 2018 bull market, and it was also higher. It's higher about 65 or 70% of the time throughout Litecoin's history. So we've got a Bitcoin halving coming. I hold Litecoin. I'm bullish on it. I think Bitcoin's going to pull Litecoin up with it. Maybe not to a new all-time high, but it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm in it, and I think a lot of people will look at when I talk about crypto, and they just hear me talk about what I see happening to the price, and they go, it's just speculation. You're just speculating. Where's the real value that's coming from the space? But I mean, we're seeing many ATMs get installed all over the world. I mean, we're seeing people in other countries. We're fortunate that we live in an area that you really haven't seen a massive financial disruption yet, where there's a real need for cryptocurrencies. But if you go to Venezuela and some of these other countries around the world, there's a real material benefit to actually be in, gold or cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically, in relation to the financial system that they otherwise would be in. I mean, it's clear, it's black and white. If you're not, I mean, you might be getting crushed, and you might not be eating tomorrow, right? So that's really the fundamentals that I see when it comes to Bitcoin, because ultimately that could happen here. I mean, we're looking at global debt and trillions of dollars just ramp up exponentially, and we're in this experiment that I don't think people fully understand, and they don't realize that we're in this matrix of an experiment that is just being tried out. We're depending on what has historically worked over maybe a few decades, but not really something that has worked for thousands of years. And that's why I think it's important to be diversified with cryptocurrency, with precious metals, with paying off your house, or what have you. I mean, your trades, your skills, all these things that will make you resilient through a crisis. Meeting people's needs at a fundamental level is going to help you get through when a lot of our normals are disrupted. So said a lot there. I'm just going to pass it back to you, give you an opportunity to respond, and we'll get into a few other things here.
Well, there are some experts out there saying, Kenneth, that interest rates are at like a 5,000 year all-time low. I don't know if that's correct or not, but they're certainly at a 60 or 70-year low here in the US. I mean, look at that chart. Yeah. That is disgusting. The effective federal funds rate kept at zero for approximately 8 years. They couldn't get liftoff. And as I keep joking on my Twitter feed, I put in quotes, the Fed needs to lower interest rates. And I always put that next to something silly like the banana duct taped to the wall, right? These are things that Saifedean talked about in his book. When you have cheap money, you have cheap art, you have cheap businesses, you have a cheap society. And I think we're unfortunately reaping the negative rewards of artificially low interest rates. But I think one image or one quote rather that I'd like to share first with the audience, Kenneth. I don't know if this guy is a crypto bull or not. I suspect he probably isn't because there aren't many of us. But this guy, Rob Arnott, his quote is successful contrarian investing requires us to live with discomfort for being wrong and alone. But bargains do not exist in the absence of fear. I mean, as bullish as you and I are on Bitcoin, I imagine you're still a little bit fearful from time to time. Hey, is this thing going to work out? Is this really the evolutionary technology and sound money that I think it is? It's perfectly normal, I think, to have those thoughts because we're all human. We all suffer from fear and greed. But it's the rare person who feels comfortable with their strong hands knowing, you know what? I have made the right decision. Bitcoin is here to stay. This is one of my favorite clips from The Big Short. And if you look at Ryan Gosling's character there, look at how relaxed and comfortable he is. Why are you guys yelling at me? Why are you so upset? And it's because the payoff hadn't come yet, right? You promised us the housing market was going to implode and all of these shorts were going to pay off, and they haven't. Well, what are we waiting for, right? And that's the key in these markets is we all just need to be patient. We need to let things play out. Things are going to take longer than you anticipate. Things can also happen more quickly than you would anticipate. I didn't picture Bitcoin rallying back to nearly $14,000 in June of 2019. That was insane. So we just got to keep our emotions in check. We got to understand the concepts of contrarian investing and just constantly try to be researching and reading things that are benefiting that pursuit.
I think that move back to 14,000 though was very healthy in the sense that it reinstilled a confidence in many who were otherwise questioning, whether or not this was a viable technology, because price proves interest, if you will, and price attracts capital, more capital. Institutional investors will enter a trade when enough of a market cap is reached. And so there's something that there is to be said about the price, as much as we don't want to focus on price all the time and say, hey, look at the fundamentals. That's the true foundation, which is, I'm not going to argue with that at all, but there is something to be said about price. I mean, if Bitcoin was $10 right now, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, right? But the fact that we have seen it, go up exponentially over the years, it's become a real viable financial instrument in the world we live in today. Let me circle back to something you were talking about, talking about the inevitability of the chaos, the financial chaos that we're seeing around the world. And let's talk about the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is, the cleanest shirt in a basket of dirty laundry, depending on who you ask. Maybe it's the worst. Jim Rogers, obviously, he's somebody who doesn't think very highly of the U.S. He sees the future in Asia. But I want to ask you, in this dynamic of the society that's just so multifaceted and nuanced, I mean, how does this look like going forward here, where we're in this closed matrix where the whole world is acting in unison and there's nothing to opt out for? That's usually what happens. I mean, if you're in a stock and there's competition that comes around, well, you just go to where capital is being treated best. But in the situation that we have now, capital is being treated horribly, equally the same all around the world. So having said that, what does this potentially look like?
I think it's going to be really bad. I mean, I've had plenty of guests on my show recently. One gentleman who I won't say his name, but man, he instills confidence in terms of the things you and I believe in: gold, silver, mining stocks. he firmly believes that Eric Sprott will be the wealthiest man in the world in less than a couple years, and maybe even sooner than that if you got a couple of drinks in him. But it is time to opt out. I think that's why, necessity is the mother of invention, Kenneth. That's why we've got the opt out T-shirt in the KF store. If anybody wants to check that out, quick silly plug. But
Yeah.
the U.S. is in very big trouble. Laws of economics apply to us as they do every other country in the world. Gold making new highs in every currency around the world except the dollar, and that's going to happen next for sure. It might even happen here in 2020. But look at this. I mean, a national debt of over 23 trillion. That's just never going to be paid off. There's no way it's possible. And then if you look down here at Medicare and Medicaid, that's 1.2 trillion in what did Trump want to sign? A $4.25 trillion budget. We have Social Security of another trillion. These are the largest budget items. The United States is insolvent. And the only reason we've been able to drag things out as long as we have is because of our exorbitant privilege, which is the world's reserve currency, the Federal Reserve note. If we had to really pay our bills like every other nation, this Ponzi scheme would have ended a long time ago. So that's where I think things stand as of the beginning of 2020 here.
So if we shift the conversation a little bit to Trump here, do you believe that Trump is fighting the deep state, and is there any good coming out of his presidency? Or is it just, the same old, same old? I mean, the deficits that are expanding, the debt going further and further into debt, just pumping the system full of easy money, that's going to lead to an ultimate crash in the system. I mean, we're just on the same trajectory.
Well, I said this the day or week before he got elected. My brother and I, who do podcasts on Kennedy Financial, we talked about it live on the show. He thought Hillary was going to win. I was pretty sure Trump was going to win just because of the rallies and all the people I saw showing up. But I stated then, and I firmly believe it now, that no one person can solve all these problems. They can potentially delay them with the power of their personality, the cult of their personality. And he has been able to do that. I mean, you do have to give him credit for that. He was able to make the stock market go up in nominal terms. I didn't see that coming. But the government lies about everything it ever talks about, whether it's, the food pyramid. They once espoused low-fat diets. Those don't work. They once told us that there were WMDs in Iraq. Those weren't there. They said no child would be left behind, and our schools are a disaster. They said, hey, if we pass this Affordable Care Act, that healthcare will be cheaper. It's more expensive. They said we needed to bail out Wall Street, and now all those guys have bonuses, and the rest of us are just struggling to make ends meet. So the government's wrong about everything, and I do believe it's time for a plan B. That's why I put it here in this tweet. This was in reference to his tweet back in July when he said, Bitcoin is not something he believes in. But to answer your question, I find it incredible just how quickly he became a politician. And he likes to win. I think for him, losing his reelection is not an option. He and Bernie were having a back and forth yesterday on Twitter. That was interesting. I think we're going to see more of that. But he likes to win, and he figured out fast what he needs to do, what a politician needs to do to get reelected. And I think he's trying to check all those boxes one by one. But the things that help him personally in his aspirations as a politician don't necessarily line up with the things that are good for you and me and our personal budgets.
Yeah. Well, one thing that on the surface I do like is, the tax cuts that we saw. I mean, that's when it's all said and done, that's fundamental. When you make the country more competitive compared to, a lot of these states that are just clearly driving businesses out, because they want high taxes, high regulations. As a whole, I believe the country is more competitive because of some of the tax cuts we've seen now. The trade war, I mean, that's up for debate exactly what his plan is for that going forward. If it's just some posturing, if it's to get some concessions. I mean, I don't think it's something that we want for many, many years. I mean, I'm sure he'll do it, do whatever he feels is right. But I think the tax cuts were a positive thing. And, it's not just, it's fundamental, right? And everyone tries to make these analysis, especially people who want to paint that in a bad light. How much growth have we seen based on these tax cuts? Or we should have kept that money, right? Or, if because it wasn't that good of a benefit for society, the government should be in charge of the money that was given back to the taxpayer. And that's just fundamentally flawed when I hear those arguments, because savings and people keeping their money is what thrives, what gives people their liberty, their freedoms, and what makes a foundational investment into the society that we live in that is going to be positive for the future generations. And that's what it's all about. But I mean, we're talking about a train that's going, 150 miles an hour down the tracks, and we're getting ready to roll right off of them. But yeah, I'll pass it back to you. Maybe give your thoughts on that. Is there any positive that you would like to give to Trump? I'm not trying to get you to make a political statement at all, but I mean, that's where I fall. I fall in between the imbalance of the deep state, extreme left, extreme liberalism, and we do have someone who's not a politician that has been a businessman who's trying to put America first in certain ways. So I do have to give him something for that.
Yeah, I will too. I mean, he's pulled back the curtain on what a farce this whole political system has become. The bottom line, Kenneth, is I think the US has irreconcilable differences at this point, just like a husband and wife who no longer want to live with one another. I think liberals and conservatives no longer want to share a society with one another. I really think that's the point we've reached. I mean, if you look at impeachment, straight down party lines over this fabricated allegation that it was a quid pro quo. I didn't read that in the transcript. Did you? I mean, it didn't look like that to me. So that's the best thing that Trump has done is he has shown all Americans in the world what a farce this system has become. I heard Jeff Dice say the other day on the Tom Woods show that if we were to have the number of representatives based on population that we had, say, 150 years ago, that we would have like 5,000 members in the House. And we only have, 435? That you and I would probably know or live right down the street from our local representative. But instead, we've got a lot of these clowns who are in there, pretending to be sad. And then you see them in the background laughing. Meanwhile, people have supposedly been killed and they're making this, sorrowful announcement. It's become such a joke. So I think you can credit Trump for that. He has caused everyone to show who they truly are in this political system. And that's why I think, we have to protect ourselves even more, because there will be more volatility when people feel like they can no longer trust their institutions. Then that's when we see chaos. And that's when something like gold shines. It's the risk off trade. So even though I know you and I have been talking about it on Cursor Street and KF for a while, I would rather be several years early than one day late. Because I think when this gets nasty, it's going to go 150 miles an hour, like you said. Some of those Dow gold charts that I showed earlier, those are going to look like an eternity in comparison. We may see it happen in a matter of months, right? It won't take years. It'll take months. Next thing you know, it'll be like, holy smokes, we're down to 2 ounces of gold for the Dow.
Yeah, it really takes when you look at the amount of days, and I mean, you even hear these type of statistics on the Dow Jones, investing in the stock market. If you miss the 17 best days of trading, you're down, or you've made no money in the stock market over the course of so many years. I have to look at the statistic, but my point is that, I mean, it happens so fast when we see the moves in the market. And I talk about it a lot. You want to be positioned and know what you're going to do. Kind of like, the image you showed there on The Big Short. You want to be spring loaded and ready to go, and not have to act in a frenzy when the frenzy starts to take place. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that reminder. But having said that, Philip, I mean, talk to us a little bit more. I mean, you're not a financial advisor. You're a financial counselor. Kind of, how should we approach 2020? I mean, this brand new decade. Gold at $1,500, Bitcoin $8,000. Just give us some closing thoughts here as we enter this new decade and traverse some very different waters.
Yeah, so I'm a forensic accountant and fraud examiner by day, but I also do financial counseling on the side. It's one of my passions. I think the market needs it because we have so many people who are being told just patently wrong things from the mainstream financial community, the CNBCs of the world. So I'm a financial counselor. I help people walk through some of the emotional issues related to money. I think I'm kind of, if I had to put it into words, what the niche that I'm trying to fill is be, say, the Dave Ramsey for the Austrian community or the gold bug community, because we've been really hit hard over the last 7 or 8 years. But I talk about sound financial principles. I help folks try to overcome indebtedness by building a monthly budget, sitting down, talking with your loved ones about where your money will go before you actually earn it. Help folks modify ineffective money management behaviors. There's plenty of them out there, leasing cars, you name it, buying things at exorbitant premium. It happens every day. And then just come up with strategies for achieving financial goals. Investing, as Warren Buffett says, isn't necessarily exciting. And if it is, we may be doing something wrong. I should have known, right? Like when Bitcoin pumped from 6,000 to 20,000 in late 2017, that was very exciting. So something was obviously very wrong. We shouldn't be trying to make a quick buck. This isn't a get rich quick scheme. Investing is something that happens over the course of a lifetime, decades, not months or years. You got to think in terms of decades. So that's where I'm at. That's what I talk about on my show. We talk about sound money, capitalism, and Austrian economics, if the poster behind me wasn't a giveaway. And that's what everyone can find over at Kennedy Financial.
Well, appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and for taking the time to come on Crush the Street. Philip Kennedy, everyone. Philip, thanks for coming on the show with me today and sharing your time.
Yep. Thank you, Kenneth.